Every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
Hi everybody. So if you've never been into my live before, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I come on, I talk to people that are doing things to empower the lives of others by sharing their story. The reason why I started this podcast is because I would come on live on Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, and talk about these issues that we struggle with. And I will always tell people there are so many people that are doing empowering things. And so I said, let me start this podcast so that I can, talk to people and share what other people are doing. And so if you don't know what the podcast looks like, let me just put it up on the screen for you. So it's called Celeste the Therapist Podcast. We're currently streaming in over 100 countries. And this is episode 222. So there's 221 empowering episodes that you can listen to throughout your day to help you kind of shift the way you think. I think that's important. A lot of times we get stuck in this negative cycle and we don't know how to get out. And my goal is to really help by showing the way different people do it. So I have a really special guest. I'm going to introduce him and add him to the stream. Hello. Can you introduce yourself to my audience?
My name is Dr. Robb Kelly. It's great to be here, Celeste. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too. So one of the things about Dr. Kelly, if you have not seen his picture, I asked him to send me a picture. This is his picture, right? And I love it for so many reasons because he's a doctor, he has a PhD, but he's very unconventional. He didn't send me no nice propped up picture. Why is that, Dr. Kelly?
I just think that because of what I do and the seriousness around it, that let's have fun. So if you know a key and a way out and have a program like we do that I created that guarantees you the result at the end of the day, why not have fun doing it? I spent so much time struggling with addiction myself, so many times crying and being miserable, that as of about 15 years ago, it all ended for me. It was like, from now on, I'm just going to be the craziest, best professional person I could ever be while carrying this powerful message. So that's probably why.
I love it. So Dr. Kelly is a well-renowned addiction expert who believes in treating the problem, not the symptoms. So one of the things I kind of want to start with is you. Where are you from? And how is it that you just shared that you were struggling with addiction, but when did you start using, and what did you start using before you realized you was dealing with an addiction?
I was thrown on stage at the age of 9 with music. I'm a musician by trade. I always like to say I'm a musician and play guitar and stuff. So I was on stage at 9 with a musical family, and that's where I took my first drink. And from the moment I took that drink, for my nerves, everything seemed to change. And I know now, but I didn't know then, that that's when my alcoholism started. And throughout all my childhood, there was trauma and there was rough times. We come from a pretty poorish family, not very poor, but like middle class poor. Dad used to drive, used cars and work for the gas board. God bless him. They worked really hard. I'm very proud of him. But it was just that upbringing that caused a lot of trauma. And my drinking obviously took off, and all sorts of crazy things happened from there.
So one of the things about substance abuse, I think, is that I hear people say, well, I'm not like those people, when I notice there's a problem. What was it that gave you the aha moment that, like, I do have an addiction? Because it doesn't start with somebody just being on a corner waiting for the liquor store to open like people think. When did you have your aha moment?
This is going to sound crazy, Celeste. But
no, it doesn't. I'm a therapist.
Okay.
I hear everything.
All right. Well, listen to this. I never realized until I lost the house, the car, the kids, the wife, the parents, the brother, sister, lost home, was homeless. And I don't mean couch surfing. I mean living, sleeping in bus shelters, sleeping in cardboard boxes. I was a year on the streets being beaten and just down to about 120 pounds. I was died twice on the streets. They brought me back to life, tried suicide 4 times. And then after all that, I suddenly realized that one morning I broke down and cried from my belly and realized that I couldn't stop drinking. And that's what it took. It was like, it was crazy. It's like you must have had, people say you must have had some inkling early on, and I didn't. I mean, I knew I drank a lot, and I would stop for periods of time, a day, a week, a month, but I never knew that I couldn't stop until everything was gone. Everything.
Yeah. And I remember something I watched, I believe when you were on the doctors, you were waking up in the morning to get a drink and then you started shaking. Do you remember that story you told?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Can you share that?
That was a daily occurrence for me. I mean, there was one, I started drinking Friday, Saturday, Sunday night when I was young. Towards my end, in my early teens, 20s, I would drink every single day from 6 o'clock in the morning until I passed out at night time. So when I came through, I would shake in the morning getting up and needed a drink to get to work. And that work went on for a couple of years. I masked that pretty well. It wasn't until, you see, I knew I had that kind of a problem, but I always thought it was the alcohol. Let's just leave the alcohol alone. Well, okay, and I did it for times, week, a month maybe. But one morning I was stood outside a store, 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was about 2 below, it was freezing cold. I'm stood there in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, sweating like crazy because I'm going into DTs, delirium tremors, which is absolute, the body going into shock. And I walked into the liquor store, and he always serves me early because he knows I have a problem. And he put the bottle on the counter, and I'm shaking and I'm sweating. And I grabbed hold of the bottle, and this is what my reaction. And I remember looking at the bottle and feeling that joy inside. All the shakes had stopped, sweating had stopped, and I realized there and then was my aha moment is, wow, it's not the alcohol. And that was my pivotal turning point. There was homelessness after that. But when I come back, I concentrated my studies for the last 27 years on the brain, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, and the way we think around addiction and trauma. And that's where I got it all from, that moment in that liquor store.
That's good. Now, I really want to get into your studies because I grew up in America, and I think that a lot of times we treat the symptoms and we try to do these quick fixes. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And you know, I read it and I have chills at how many mistakes we make in America around the way that we're treating people. And a lot of times they may not fit the DSM. For people that don't know what that is, the diagnostic manual that mental health professionals utilize to diagnose people, because it's just so complicated. Can you share with us a little bit about your studies and what you've learned?
Well, early on, I mean, only 10 years ago, we found out that the brain was like plastic, that we could mold and we could change, and neural pathways can be changed. So my findings, they go early on. So first of all, alcoholism is the only self-diagnosed illness. You can't be diagnosed by anybody but yourself. 10 DUIs does not make you an alcoholic. Alcoholism has got very little to do with alcohol, period. And I'll tell you why. There's always trauma. Whatever's alcohol addiction, there's always trauma. And now somebody said to me, how do you define trauma? This is another pivotal moment in my studies. Anything less than nurturing a child is child abuse, especially if you have the addictive brain. Because what happens is the subconscious brain will grab hold of that trauma and we'll keep it, and we'll keep it, and we'll keep it. And what happens is we find alcohol or drugs, which then releases them subconscious thoughts, which come to the forefront. You see, my prefrontal cortex it does a great job. The whole idea of my prefrontal cortex is to come up with an answer to my problem straight away. That's its only job, and it does a fantastic job. The only problem is it doesn't have to be the right answer. So for me, is drinking alcohol as you is the drinking water. And that was the basis of my studies, is if I'm born with a self-sabotaging brain that's ingrained, even though we have billions of neural pathways, the self-sabotaging main neural pathways are ingrained into my brain. How are we going to change that? And that was the pivotal moment again. How are we going to change it away from the self-sabotaging, and I'll show you a diagram really quick. The self-sabotaging, which is this, and we're trying to build neural pathways off this self-sabotaging one. So this is kind of like the main freeway in your town or city or state. Everybody goes down this road to work or wherever. That's my self-sabotaging neural pathway. That's the guy that wants to commit suicide. That's the guy that's going to make me drink every time. What I'm doing, or we're doing at Robb Kelly Recovery Group, is we're trying to build healthy neural pathways off. So a healthy neural pathway would be self-care day, would be getting a haircut, would be thinking good, eating right, acting properly, trying not to curse, all this great stuff. And what happens over a period of time is this, over a 90-day period. And what happens is this, which is a great neural pathways for me because it's self-care, and it actually is a knee-jerk reaction. See, if I have to think about trying to come this way, it's never going to happen. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It happens in seconds. So it has to change. And if it doesn't change, then I'm going to drink and self-sabotage again. And that will be repeated and repeated until I die. So it's about changing neural pathways, changing the way the brain functions. My hypothalamus secretes, it's a fight or flight deal at the back, secretes into the brain what I need to do to survive. Now, the normal person, survival instincts are drink water, eat food. That's it. With mine and alcoholics, it's drink alcohol. Now, why is that important? You can see how I do not have any choice over drinking, because it's automatic. The brain's automatically telling me to do that. And that's why the alcoholic can go weeks, days, months without eating or drinking, just drinking alcohol, because that's what my brain tells me to do. Why would I do anything else? I wouldn't.
So as you described the way that we can work on changing the way it looks, what does that process looks like in real time for the actual person? Because I can only imagine that it's a hard process, especially if you've been using since 9 years old, right? That's a hard process.
Well, we can change. We use neuro-linguistic programming and somatic experience, where we listen to the body. We also change. Our 90-day program is in the office every day, 1 hour a day for 90 days. And during that hour's process for the 90 days, we are changing the way you think and using the craziest thing. So repetition, strengthening, and confirms is the first thing. So if I say to you, Celeste, you're not very good at what you do, you're terrible, you're terrible, you're terrible. If I tell you often enough, you're going to start to believe that. Now, if I surround myself with people saying you're amazing, you're amazing, you're amazing, I start to believe that. So the brain is very fickle when it comes to adapting to what we hear. So if I tell you a lie, you might believe it. If I tell you a lie often enough, you're going to believe it. Hey, Celeste, if I tell you real often enough, I'm going to start to believe it. Psychology 101. So that's the first thing we look at, is changing them neural pathways, different thought patterns, building different ones. It could be music therapy. There's got to be something you've never done before. We also leave messages from your house to traveling here, might be 10 miles, might be 20 miles. We will leave messages on the side of the road for you that says, you're amazing, or you're fantastic, or Diet Coke is amazing, and you come here and we ask you what do you want to drink, and you say Diet Coke, and we know automatically we started using that language that you have no idea, not aware of. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the drink compulsion for alcohol ceases to exist, because it's now not a knee-jerk reaction. And also being kind to yourself, keeping a rigid program, and it's a 90-day, and it doesn't happen before 90 days. If somebody comes to me and goes, hey, Dr. Kelly, I want to do 60 days, but I'll pay you the full 90, we say no, not happening.
So during this 90 days process, because it sounds like this is something you're currently doing on a regular basis, are people completely sober, or is it more harm reduction, or how does that work?
Full abstinence, 100%, 94% success rate.
Wow, that is amazing, Dr. Kelly.
Right, over 27 years with 5,500 patients. So we're kind of the go-to people for the guys that know. So we get our referrals by word of mouth, and we've been busy. I came over here 12 years ago. We're busy every day. We only take on 4 clients though, 4 patients, because even though you're only with us an hour a day, there's still homework and check-ins and accountability stuff that we need to keep an eye on you and check on you, and we'll come and surprise you one day and breathalyze you, and all sorts of stuff goes into it. But It's a program that I devised some 20 odd years ago because I was sick to death of watching people die of alcoholism because there don't seem to be anything anybody could do about it. And I wanted to change that. There's alcoholism in my family, and I nearly died of it. So I wanted to change it. But not only that, we help put families back together. We reunite mums and dads. You know, that's what we like to do, rather than just the alcohol problem. When you come in, I guarantee it's gone. I will guarantee that you will never drink or use ever again if you continue to do this program. That's how confident I am, because it's an amazing program.
Well, one of the things you just talked about, the somatic, having people kind of pay attention to what they're feeling, and that's something in The Body Keeps the Score. They talk about that a lot. Can you tell people why that part's important to understand what the body's doing? Because I feel like that's where we miss the mark.
Yeah, well, if they're well used around it, we don't rely on it too more, is what called a gut feeling. This is a layman's term to explain it. So we have a gut feeling. Everyone says, trust your gut. What's your gut feeling? That goes back to the tribal days. You know, that's a real thing where one of the tribal men, usually men or, you know, sometimes women, would get that feeling that there's fear, that there's danger there, and they'd wake the rest of the tribe up, and then they'd either move or prepare for battle. Now, we've forgotten about that. We don't listen to our body. So my program relates to the subconscious brain, the body, and then the prefrontal cortex, the conscious brain. So I believe, and is my research and findings, that alcoholism and addiction is based in the subconscious brain. So I have no idea when I'm going to relapse. Johnny around the corner has no idea when he's going to relapse because it's subconscious. But what happens somehow, I'm still working on this, is from the subconscious, it goes down to the body. And we start getting irritable. We start acting differently. We start being antsy, as they say in the UK, just not feeling right. Little Johnny now becomes a pain in the backside, and this pen's red and not black, and all that great stuff, but we take no notice. And then what happens when it goes to the conscious brain is we find ourselves wasted or drunk going, what the hell just happened? You see, alcoholism and drug addiction will never come to me on a Monday and go, hey, Rob, let's have a drink. Never does that. It's a day, a week, or even a month before when the body's changing, and I don't even notice it. Well, now we do. So we can stop. And that thing here that I talked about, there's a time frame here. This time frame is 7.3 seconds. During that 7.3 seconds, when my body tells my conscious brain, I want to drink, there's the time frame we can change that neural pathway thought pattern. Before it didn't exist. But now we have like a precursor. It's like, okay, Rob, your body's different, something's happening, and all of a sudden that time frame we can change from self-sabotage to healthy neural pathways.
Yes, and I think that even though we're talking about addiction, we can utilize that same mindset around our negative thoughts, you know, when it comes to ourselves, right?
Exactly. And that's what people say to me. It's a shame you just do addiction. I'm like, I don't do addiction. Alcohol and drugs have got hardly anything to do with it.
Nope.
What I do is set yourself up. It's like, you know, it's just, there's so many things that you can do with the brain. We only know a little. Quantum physics tells me, my program's partly based on quantum physics as well. It's a science, it's a fact, it's proven. So let's say a basketball court. I can be 25 places at any one time on that court. That's what quantum physics tells me. Where would I like to be? Well, I want to be over near the goal. So when somebody passes to me, I can just dunk it in and score. Oh, that's great then. How are you going to get there? Woo, you ready, listeners? Listen to this. I walk over and I take that position. I don't ask for it. I don't worry about it. I don't plan the route over there. I walk over and I take the position. And that's how we get somewhere in life. If we can imagine it, walk over and take it. It's yours. But the thing is we make practical decisions based on fear. What if I'm not good enough? Listen, guys, listen, I want to tell you something out there now, and it might shock you, but I'm going to tell you, you're never going to be blonde enough, tall enough, thin enough, or rich enough. It just isn't going to happen. So love the body, love who you are, and get on with life because nobody's watching you. I thought everybody was watching. Oh, what if I do this wrong? What if I do that? It's like nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Through the day on their own, you know, it's like the world is your oyster when you start thinking like this. And addiction disappears and you can start pushing that envelope all the time and start being the person that God meant you to be, for goodness sake.
Yes.
I get
No,
excited about this, so
no, I know. And so I guess, so if you don't know already, Dr. Kelly's very like straightforward. One of the things that people call you is the Gary V of what you do. If you're not familiar with Gary V, he's somebody that just goes straight to the jugular. What is it about your methods that causes people maybe to say you're controversial in the way that you do things? What is it about it that people are struggling with? Because I love it.
Well, first of all, it's because I tend to curse a little bit when I'm working with the disease, because I'm shocking the disease out of you. And secondly, I won't dress this thing up. They call me a couple of things: the Gary V of addiction and the Gordon Ramsay of addiction.
Oh, the Gordon Ramsay! I forgot about him.
I like the Gary V better. I love Gary V. But it's like, if you don't do this deal and get well, if you're an alcoholic, you're going to die. So why don't you go home and either tell your wife you're going to die or go back drinking? Because you're never going to get it. It's never going to work for you. Anything else is not going to work. So either do it or not. And people either take to me or they don't. It's like, I will go to any lengths to make sure that you recover. So we had a guy once, a young kid, and he couldn't speak to women. He wasn't an addict or an alcoholic. He had a little bit of Alzheimer's. But he was a great young guy, good-looking guy, no confidence. So what I did is it's all about the brain. So I went to a friend of mine who owned a bar. I put 20 girls in there, all paid by me, to sit there and drink. And we went in and I said, look, here's what you do. Look around, which girl do you want? He says, what about the blonde over there with the black-haired girl? Of course, they're my girls. They're working for me. So I said, come on. And he's so nervous. And we walked over and he started to talk. And I come away from the table and the other girl come away. And him and this girl was having this beautiful conversation. He bought dinner and everything. And then he come away. He never knew that we planted them girls there. But his love life and relationship life skyrocketed because he had the confidence. And sometimes it's just somebody telling you. I say to people all the time, if we could swap places for 2 minutes and you could see what I was looking at, all your problems would be over.
Yeah.
I mean, even you, Celeste, now, when you turned it on, it's like probably one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. Beautiful hair, just beautiful smile. It's like, has anybody told you that face to face? Has anyone told you how amazing you are? Probably not for a few days, like, because you think you know. Well, that's not good enough. We need to be told. You know, that's one of the things that people, oh, Dr. Kelly, I never told him he's good. He knows he's good. No, I don't. I'm just doing what I think's best. And when I compliment people, dopamine starts flying around my brain. And I'm an addict. I like dopamine. So I'm always thanking people and complimenting people because the world needs more of this. Look at the state of the world right now. Mm-hmm. Everybody's hating everybody for the sake of it. Stop. It's harder to love somebody than it is to hate. Put the fucking work in, guys. Compliment somebody. If I'm driving down a gas station and I see the woman there with the 5 kids in the back and she's trying to put $5 in, I'm stopping. My wife goes crazy. Stop the car. I jump out, I walk over, fill it full of gas. I give her $100 and I say, have a great day. I don't want anything back, but it's being kind to my fellow human being. And the world needs more of this stuff.
Yeah.
You see, we can't just talk the talk. I've heard these guys and they're talking this. What happens when there's nobody around and you drop a piece of paper, Mr. Smith? Do you pick it up or do you leave it on the floor? Because if you leave it on the floor, you know better than anybody else. Pick it up when there's nobody watching. And all this excitement, all this study, all this positivity creates a big program, but it wasn't always like this for me. The day they took my kids off me, ages 1 and 2, my wife left and took them off me. I called my attorney. He brought them back the next day. I brought my 2 little girls in. I sat them down in front of the TV, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I just had 1 drink to celebrate? Celeste, 3 days later, when the police kicked the door down, and my daughters hadn't been fed for 3 days, and the diapers had not been changed, and I was wasted on the floor, and they took my kids off me, Celeste, and the police officer and the authorities served me papers saying unfit father. And my daughter said 3 things as she carried them away. She said, Daddy, Daddy, please don't go. And then further on down the path, she says, Daddy, Daddy, please get better. And the last thing my daughter said 28 years ago was, Daddy, Daddy, please stop drinking, Celeste. And I couldn't do it. It wasn't humanly possible for me to do it. And this is what people don't get. It's like it was physically and mentally impossible for me to stop for the sake of my kids or anybody else. You know, I just do what I've got to do, and I hope that miracles will come and happen to me. And they do, because 12 months ago, My eldest daughter got in touch with me on Facebook. After 27 years, Celeste. I went over there last year and met her for the first time in 27 years. I met my granddaughter, who's 2 years old. I held her in my hands. Tell me there's no God. Tell me, prove me wrong, because I stood there and I cried. And my life is absolutely amazing today because I'm working with God's kids, man. I'm doing what I have to do, and I do it passionately. You know, my father, God bless, he's a great guy. He could have died 20 minutes ago, and you would never know that, because that's not my deal. My deal is to inspire people whenever I get in front of them. You know, I come around to inspire and to bear witness to those people that are struggling with depression, bipolar, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, it makes no difference.
When I think about thank you for sharing that and your transparency. When I think about all of the things that you've gone through, you have a story, like there's a story behind, and your passion speaks through your work. If there's somebody listening to this that they're not in Texas, and maybe they are struggling, like what would you say to them if you were sitting in front of them right now?
Don't sit and struggle on your own. Don't think you're the only one going through this, because this is what I thought. I was embarrassed to tell anybody, especially men. Let's start voicing this stuff. Call me, call anybody. You know, we are huge on telehealth. We love telehealth. We can I'll send my plane for you and pick you up. It makes no difference. The bottom line is, don't sit there. Don't think you're the only one and you can't ask for help. Dialogue will squash a lot of thoughts and fear. Dialogue is very good for suicide. Suicide is a permanent solution for a temporary problem. You know, so when you're feeling like this, or you can't stop drinking, or you're depressed and you've got no future, no, you have got a future. Maybe you need to go through this uncomfortable time to find out who you are. You see, I got well to start feeling, you know, sort of feeling better. What I found out is that wasn't my deal. I need to get better at feeling. That was my deal. You know, I want you to start understanding why you're going through this, because there's a reason you're going through it, by the way, guys. There's a reason. Sit in that uncomfortable thing, but don't sit too long. Mm-hmm. Dialogue is important, and self-dialogue is vital. You know, if I drop a piece of paper or a pen on the floor, I used to say, "Oh, what an idiot." Don't say that anymore, Celeste. That's dangerous for me.
Yeah.
I just dropped a pen on the floor. Stop telling yourself something that's not true. You know, we had a patient from here about 4 years ago, and he left the session, and we got a phone call, and his wife had been killed in a car accident. And my assistant came in and said, "Can you call him? I don't know what to say to him." So I did. I called him up and said, "John, I got some bad news, man. And you need to pull over." He pulled over his car, and I told him, "Your wife's been killed in a car accident." Oh my God, he went to pieces. His body was shaking. You could hear him crying and shaking, and you know, I think he even wet himself. He lost all control of his body functions. 20 minutes later, the assistant comes rushing in. She's got the wrong John. It wasn't John W. It was John T.
Oh my God.
So we called John T and explained, but then I called John W back and said, "Look, we made a mistake." And we made it okay with him, Celeste, but it got me thinking. I just told him that over the phone, and it wasn't true, yet his body reacted in such a way that he had no control of it. So can you imagine what you can do to somebody when you speak to them in the right way? How the body can change and the mind can change without no effort on your behalf because of what you say. And that's one of the bases of my model today, is that guy went to pieces and had no control of his body. God bless him. We apologized a billion times, but how powerful are words? How powerful is the spoken word?
Mm-hmm. And yes, I think words are powerful. That's why, like, I called this live video, I call it Shifting the Way You Think, right? Because it's important to do that. So your advice is so on point about don't do it alone. Because we've been talking about the brain, I really want you to tell people what happens when you isolate alone and how the brain starts to believe the lies that you tell it.
It does, and especially if you have the addictive brain. And a lot of people who don't think they've got the addictive brain do. All the clever guys in business, the smart guys that you know, they all have the addictive brain. It needs to get focused on one thing. The only bad thing about the addictive brain is when one goes into depression, we'll focus on just that. And we will continue to believe what our brain tells us. Especially prefrontal cortex will lie to us like crazy. And sat on your own and left to your own devices, you'll not only start believing that, but you'll start acting like that. So if I walk in a room with a frown on my face and there's 10 people there, probably 9 out of them 10 people are going to frown back. If I walk in with the same people next day with a smile on my face, 9 out of 10 are going to smile back. It's the same with self-dialogue and self-preservation. Is you've got to be careful, especially on your own. And that's why we're communication animals. We need to communicate with people. And that's the pandemic that we're going through now is okay right now. But if it carried on for a year or two, you know, people say, I've got 5,000 friends on Facebook. Let me tell you, you're plugged into the wall. That's what you are. We need that human contact. If you sit at home on Facebook all day and you try and go out, you can't interact with normal people because we don't have the social skills. So this is all important. Sit there for a time, sit there with the pain, recognize the pain, and then call somebody and start voicing this stuff. Because once you voice it, you take the power out of it.
Yes.
See,
Go ahead.
What happens with the human body is, if you've ever seen a deer, I saw a deer once, it got hit by a car. It wasn't killed, it got hit by a car. It was obviously a traumatic deal for the deer. The deer stood up and it shook violently for about 10 or 15 seconds. That was getting rid of the trauma. That deer will never suffer from that trauma ever again, that incident. As human beings, we don't do that. Well, we don't speak about things like that in this house. Oh, well, we sweep that under the carpet. This is dangerous talk. It's like a zip file. That's right, Mommy and Daddy, keep sticking all this stuff in that zip file on the computer. Then one day when I'm not expecting it, I'll click on that file and everything at once will overload me and I won't be able to cope. So it's important that we cope with these things as they come up with our life.
Yeah, no, that's good. One of the things you said about actually feeling, I've had clients who talk about this numb feeling, and then we start working on actually what's happening and naming the feeling. And they actually feel, they say it's not comfortable, but they feel better that they can actually feel. As a human, because everybody that's listening are humans. Can you talk to people about the fact that we are going to experience pain and there's emotions that, maybe we didn't grow up talking about, but they're there?
Getting in touch with one's feelings is very painful. It's also alien to a lot of people. So we have to remember that. And sitting with your feelings and recognizing the pain is very important for a couple of reasons. One is the body will go through healing while you're doing that. And secondly, how do you know you're living your life beyond your wildest dreams if you've not hit the low of the low? How can you judge a high? So the lows in our life are meant to be there for a reason. Because when we get the highs, we can measure. And somewhere along the line, we come to the fourth dimension, where it's just, you see, my life was always like my emotions and feelings. Today, it's like this. And that takes patience. It takes practice. And it takes help. I can't do this on my own because I will start believing my brain when it starts telling me crazy stuff like, you've got bipolar, you're never going to get a job again, I'll never get a girlfriend. I mean, it's crazy stuff, but it's so powerful when self-dialogue takes over your body. So it's really important that you have to understand that pain is good. It really is good. But what we mustn't do is get into morbid reflection over that pain and start to suffer too much. Recognize it, try and find out why it's here, try and recognize your part in it, because that's very important. Well, I have no part in that. If I walk out of the house now and somebody punches me on the nose, I have a part to play in that. I have to think what I've done. Oh yeah, I forgot I slept with his girlfriend 10 years ago. There's always a part that we don't want to remember. But that's the pain that we need to look at, we need to analyze, and we need to sit with for a short while until it goes.
Someone says, so trying to heal this childhood emotional neglect and traumas.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Trauma is huge. And I don't think we recognize how huge it is in our life. We never shake anything off as kids. And when we grow up, we carry this trauma all along. People come to me and they go, oh, Dr. Kelly, you don't understand. I'm not just an alcoholic. I have childhood stuff and depression. I'm like, oh, really? Really? You think you're the only one that's got? Everybody that comes to me has childhood trauma and depression because it's been left untreated for so long. It's bound to fester and it's bound to get ugly and it's going to erupt if you don't deal with it. We have a saying here, you have to go back to the scene of the crime and you have to clear that stuff up and then you have to move on. And a lot of it is inner child work, which people don't like. I spent 3 months talking to a chair where my dad was sat in. And it's the only way I could have got through some of the stuff that I went through. I'm my mom, I'm my daughters. If you leave this stuff, it will destroy you. In more ways than one, it will destroy you. And there's no way to live. I mean, you've got to live life. You know, I have a T-shirt that I made up. Well, I had 1,000 T-shirts, and it says, "Stop dreaming a living and start living the dream." Because I used to always sit there dreaming, what would it be like if I had this? Wouldn't it be great if I could do this? And one day I thought, why can't I? Why can't I? I come to America and like people say, you'll never go on TV. But it's just too many people in America. It's too big. You'll never go on TV. A stupid English guy. You know, my DVDs within 3 days sold out nearly $5 million. You know, and I've been on every TV show that's out. I've been on Oprah, I've been on Dr. Phil, I've been on a doctor. It's like, no, you can do anything you put your mind to, you know? You just have to be in 100% and believe 100% you can do it. And you can. When my patients come, we do a 10-minute what you want out of life. Well, I want to, you know, at least have $1 million in the bank. Why don't we write that check now to yourself and we'll stick it in the safe? And in 2 years' time, we'll cash it. Every time we've done that, it's always been cashed to last on the time frame that we said. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. If you believe you're going to do it, you can do it. I take my guys that is just starting off out of college. We have a lot of college kids. I take them to the Porsche dealership. Let's sit in the Porsche, take it for a drive. Let's go in that $1 million house. Let's sit in there for a bit. Let's go to this golf club and play there. And what happens with the brain is once we've been there, it preempts the fear around it. And it's like, well, I've already been there, so I can go there again. And when we get there again of our own free will, it's not overwhelming going, wow, I don't deserve this. I can't believe I'm here. Well, no, you've been here before. It's just natural and it feels good. That's the key to life.
Yeah. And you're creating that environment, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's so good.
And you put all that together and then you do good. You try and act the good Samaritan every day. You try and say kind words to people. You compliment people. I compliment 3 people on a daily basis. And then life becomes better.
It does.
It really does.
One of the sayings I say is you have more power than you realize. You just have to have faith to believe in yourself. I feel like God gives us, so God is within us, but a lot of us haven't tapped into it.
No.
Yeah.
And I know. And I always enforce that. It's like, if you're a God believer, you're on a winner. I'm telling you. You know, I heard this story once where this guy goes to heaven and Peter meets him at the gate and he's taking him down this big, long corridor and there's all these names on the door and everything. The guy's had a pretty normal life. He's never got anything, never won anything, never done anything in his life. And he goes past the door and he sees his name on the door. He says to Peter, can I look in that room? And he said, no, you don't want to. He said, let me look. Anyway, he opened the door and it was a warehouse full of boxes with bows on them, like thousands and thousands and thousands. And he said, what are these? He said, they're the gifts that God, sent you. And what do you mean sent me? I never received anything. He said, no, what happened is, when you used to live on Faith Street, remember that, when you lived on Faith Street and then you relocated to Doubt Street or you relocated to Fear Street, well, all them gifts went to Faith Street, but you weren't there, so they had to be sent back to the sender. And I thought, wow, that is so true. You know, when I was a kid, Celeste, we were already poor. I had a little tiny radio. I used to listen to the top 40 radio singles at home, 6 o'clock on Sunday night. And one night I run downstairs and I called up for a request. And I said, hey, can you play a request for Rob in Manchester? And I run upstairs and the guy said to me, oh yeah, definitely play it on the playlist. It'll definitely going to get played, Rob, don't worry. I put the phone down, I run upstairs and I sat by that transistor radio for 4 hours, Celeste. And after about 3.5, 4 hours, the request came on. This is going out to Rob, to Manchester. My mum said to me, I was so excited. I said, why did you wait all that time for it? I said, Mom, he said it was on the playlist. It was going to get played. It's just a matter of waiting. And I believe that's the deal with God. God has I've put my request in. It's on his playlist. Everything I want is on his playlist. I know it's going to get played. It's just a matter of time. So that big car or the big house, which I have everything now that I need, I knew it was going to happen because it was on his playlist.
I love that so much.
There was no doubt it wasn't going to happen. I mean, if you have that much faith and belief that God give me the powers to do this, me and God had a conversation as I come off the streets and I stood up and I walked home with the guy that saved me off the streets. And he said, Rob, travel around the world and guarantee people can recover from alcoholism. That's your main job. Do that. Everything else will be taken care of. And it has been, because I believe that that's my job today. And I believe that he believes in me.
That is
beautiful. I believe I'm on his playlist, Celeste.
I know.
We're all on the playlist. But you see, he wants to give us so much, but we ask for so little. Oh God, can I just get like $10 more in my paycheck? No, I want a job where I earn $1 million a year, God, because I'm doing your work. And he goes, yes, you can. Might not be today, but you're on my playlist, Rob. Don't worry.
I love that.
It's a win situation.
That is so good. I love you so much. Oh my gosh, you're so contagious. For people that are listening, you said you do telehealth. If people wanted to reach out to you and figure out how to work with you, what would they need to do?
Google my name, first of all. If you have not got a pen with you, just Robb Kelly, 2 B's, ROBBKELLY. Just put me in Google. Everything will pop up there. If you're feeling really brave, it's the same name.com. So it's robkelly.com. And you'll find my phone number somewhere, or my staff, or anything. Yeah. But listen, this is just for you, for your listeners and viewers, Celeste. I'm gonna put my personal number with all my staff. So if you call up and go, hey, I was listening to Rob on the Celeste show, the therapist, what's going to happen is they're going to give you my personal cell phone number, and you're going to come through and talk to me. You talk to me direct. Information, advice, and a quick pep talk is always free in my book. And then if you need to go on the program, great, we can sort something out. But if you don't, and just go, I feel really depressed, and that crazy English guy, the Gordon Ramsay, I want to speak to him for 10 minutes. Call me. We can do that. I can lift you quicker than the rocket that's just taken off for the space station. Believe me.
I love it. Thank you. You are amazing. I'm grateful that you're here to share your knowledge, your experience, the way that where you were before. I always use this example. I say to people, if you are struggling with addiction, you walk into a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting on day 1 and you're discouraged, but then you hear somebody's story who's been sober for 20 years. And so when I hear your story, you don't look like where you've come from, right? And it gives me hope, it gives me hope. So I know that you are living in your purpose, and those times you tried to commit suicide, like, you're here for a reason, and I'm just grateful that you landed on my podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled by them compliments, and I'm telling you, it's just, I don't know, I had this pull towards you as soon as your name came through, and I did a quick research, and this time of night I don't do many. I'm getting old now and tired. But when you came through, I'm like, I've got to do this, Celeste. I have to do this. She sounds so amazing. So thank you so much. It's been my pleasure, absolutely, to come. I'm so excited I was on with you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to call my friends now. I'm bragging to them.
I'm going to do the same.
Where can people see it? Did you just come to your website?
So YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, or it's going to be on the podcast tonight. So so this is what I was doing, Dr. Kelly. I've been podcasting since 2018, talking to people that are empowering other people. The pandemic started. I wanted to figure out what I can do. Initially, I was podcasting just audio once a week. So in March, I said, let me just bring my podcast on video platform. So I do it 5 days a week. And
wow.
So I talk to a lot of people, but I'm always inspired by everyone's stories. And so, I just celebrated 100,000 downloads a couple weeks ago. So I'm excited. People are listening, and the audience is growing. And so that's why I'm grateful to you. I couldn't do it without people like you. Oh, thank you.
Well, we do it because you're awesome. That's why. Absolutely awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I won't be able to sleep tonight now because I want to speak to you again. I'm going to call you up in a couple of weeks and speak to you again. You're awesome.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
All right, bye.
Bye.
He was so good. Thank you guys for tuning in to the podcast. Remember, if you came in late, you wanted to check out the beginning or listen to it on the audio, you can find it here, Celeste the Therapist Podcast. And Dr. Kelly's information will be up in the show notes, all the ways that you can reach him. If you Google his name, he's literally everywhere. His energy is definitely contagious, and the love and passion that he has for people is amazing. So it's Friday. We'll be back Monday. doing the same thing. I'll be talking to somebody that's empowering other people. And until next time, beautiful people, I'll talk to you later.
Every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking